Today is Monday, December the 8th, 2025. We have gold hovering just under 4,200 an ounce and silver hovering under $58 an ounce. I think they're going to be range bound, typical of an FOMC week until Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard. That's when we'll get some real volatility, some real action. So I think until then, we're going to be range bound. Today's video, we're going to talk about market gurus. I want to talk about some of the ones I follow, some of the ones I consider fake gurus. I also want to spend some time talking about gold, silver miners, royalty companies. And then finally, today's featured coin in the Libertad series, it is the 2021. If you've been following me for a while, or if you watched some of my early content, I was predominantly focused in on silver coins, specifically Mexican Libertads. My initial motivation to do YouTube videos was essentially seeing what was going on in the Mexican numismatic business, where a lot of dealers, a lot of folks were gatekeeping information, and they were using that advantage to rip off new collectors. And I really wanted to make this channel available to new collectors, to the Mexican Libertad series, to offer genuine facts and evidence so they're not getting ripped off when they make a purchasing decision. And then as I was producing the videos, I started pivoting to discussing gold and silver in general as my bull thesis since 2008. If you watch my one and only short on my channel, I kind of summed up how I got into it during the great financial crisis. And, I started pivoting and discussing more macro trends because, for me, quite frankly, going back to those years, since then, I've been eating, drinking, sleeping markets, gold and silver. I'm so neck deep into it. It's essentially, I'm always analyzing the market, always looking at metrics. And so that's why I kind of pivoted in this direction. I mentioned in one of my earlier videos that I first started investing in late 2004 in the titanium bull market, which essentially rides along with the aerospace cycle. And I talked about how, back then, all you had was really like message boards, and predominantly one of the most popular ones was the Yahoo Finance message boards. And I talked about how I got lucky that I stumbled upon a group of people who knew what they were talking about. The due diligence they mentioned made sense. But I say I got lucky because in that universe, you have, I call those people gurus because guru derived from the Sanskrit word meaning teacher, mentor. They provided a lot of rich information. They taught me the titanium industry. But at the same time, the opposite side of the coin is there's a lot of fake gurus out there. Gurus, and they would write things very eloquently and with a seemingly thoughtful process, but they were feeding false information. And so that's something that existed then, and it is something that exists now. So I wanted to spend some time this video focusing on gurus and fake gurus as it pertains to the gold and silver secular bull market. I wanted to start out by talking about one that I term a guru because he provides a lot of rich, thoughtful information. And ironically, I've only been following him for 2 months. He's on YouTube. He seems to be pretty popular. Maneko64 is the one I'm sharing here on the screen. His name is Mario Aneko. And if I thought I was early to the party by getting in on gold, silver, and the miners in 2008, well, this was the guy then setting up the decorations to the party because he got in 2003. And it was probably now about a week and a half old. He puts videos on every day. I don't know how he does it. I think it's hard enough, a couple times a week to curate content that you want to discuss, but he does it almost every day. He has either lives or he posts a video, provides very good content. I can tell you he's a real guru. He's not a fake guru. But there was a quote that just really hit me hard. It hit me so hard because I've been feeling the same exact way about this gold and silver secular bull market. And I want to read it verbatim because it hits deep. He says, "Enjoy life as well. That's really important. Look after yourself health wise, because if you don't have any health, you can't create any wealth. Look after your family, your friends. I think that's really important as well. Maybe that's why it's taken so long, this bull market, because you need to grow with it as well. If gold and silver had gone to the moon after '08, which is what I thought would happen after that crisis, I'm not sure how I would be now in terms of my character. And I'm quite happy with the way things are. That quote really stuck with me when he said that, because I felt the same way. In '08 with the crisis, money printing, and I'm going to talk about another guru. There was another guru, you saw Ben Bernanke back then was saying, "Oh, we're not doing any money printing." And this other guru he was interviewed on CNBC, and he said, "He's a liar. He's lying. They're money printing. He is a liar." And I remember that, and I'm just like, I really thought, oh, wait, I felt I was late to the party when I got in '08. I said, we're going to go and we're going to take off to the secular top. And so after that 2011 high, and you started to have a correction for a couple of years, those that remember, gold and silver and the miners then in the beginning of 2016 really began to take off. And I think a lot of us, myself included, said the correction's finally over. The last phase of this secular bull market in the precious metals is going to take off. And then I think it struck hard when it began correcting all over again in mid 2016 and continued for several years thereout. I mean, I had friends that asked me, "You're still in gold, silver, and the miners?" And I would say, "Yeah." And they'd give me this face. They wouldn't say anything else, but the face looked like, "You're an effing idiot. What are you doing? What's wrong with you?" And I think that whole process of Mario himself, he says there, he's a contrarian. He always tells you, I felt the same way that, I had the world looking at me like, "Hey, you're an effing moron. You don't know what you're doing. Like, everything's fine." And nothing could be further with the truth. I think when I first heard the term shrinkflation, I was already cognizant of that. I was going shopping. I had already noticed before it became mainstream to say shrinkflation that they were shrinking the products. The other term folks are talking about, I had not heard of this one until this year, and it makes complete sense, is in-shitification. And in-shitification essentially is saying now they're tampering with either the ingredients or the materials. I've talked about AG Stacking. He's on Instagram. He's a dealer in coins, bars, metals. Really good guy. You get really competitive pricing with him. And he asked this morning, he's like, "I can't find 100% cotton socks anymore. Can anyone recommend any?" And he's not lying. They're diluting the sock. He called them plastic socks because they're putting all these polyester and these other materials that make you have sweaty feet. They're in shitifying all our products, the foods. They're putting more crap in our food and taking away the good, wholesome ingredients from the food. So I was noticing all of this taking time. I just didn't have that word in shitification or shrinkflation. I didn't have those words in my head, but I was noticing these things happening over the years, and I said, someday the chickens are going to come home to roost, and I think that is now taking place now. We have a lot of folks saying, this is a blow off top, what's happening right now with gold and silver. And no, I wholeheartedly disagree. And this is just my opinion, not professional advice. But because I was there, because I saw things take off in early 2016, gold, silver, and the miners really took off early 2016, because then they were suppressed for that much longer, for many more years. Now the spring is being let go, and all this energy that's been withheld, all this money printing that's taking place, it's now being released. All that energy is now being released, and a lot of people are misidentifying it as blow off top. So I highly recommend you follow Mario Maneko64 on YouTube. He has a lot of great content. I want to talk about some more gurus. I have a book here on my screen. This is from Mark Faber. So Mark Faber, he was the guy I was talking about in the earlier anecdote, that he was interviewed on CNBC in the era of Ben Bernanke. Ben Bernanke saying, "Oh, we're not printing money." And he called him out. He said, "You're a liar. He's lying. We are printing money." I highly recommend him. You can find tons of interviews from him all over YouTube. Very easy to find. I recommend his books. That was his first book. This was his second book. And he has one other. That's Mark Faber. Highly recommend you check out his content. He puts together great stuff. Another one I highly recommend is Jim Rogers. This is one of his many books. You can also find a lot of his interviews on YouTube. There's a lot of folks, particularly in the gold and silver markets, that interview him. And I like him because he's humble. He doesn't make any timing promises. He will tell the interviewer, I don't know when this is going to happen. I'm not that guy that can tell you exactly when. He just analyzes the market. He sees the overall trend. And so I've seen people criticize like him and Mark Faber, but these guys have never said, and I'm going to contrast that with the fake gurus. These ones in particular, they're not telling you, oh, next month or in 3 months, this is exactly is going to happen. Hate to break it to you, but no one really has that ability unless they have insider information. I want to cover some other folks I follow just to give you an idea that, it's impossible to learn everything from one person, one guru per se, one teacher. You got to kind of gather from multiple sources. There's always somebody that can provide additional context, additional insight, or line of sight. And what I'm showing here is what are two of my favorite technical analysis folks, the folks that do charts. And they're on Twitter. I still love to call it Twitter. I have a hard time saying X. North Star and Grady. I don't know if I'm pronouncing Grady's name correctly, but that's how I pronounce it. They provide a lot of great charts. I have featured their charts on earlier videos. So if you're not following them, they really give you some good perspective in terms of technical analysis. Another one I've been following for years, Frank Giustra, and you can find old interviews over a decade ago, really good interviews talking about the same things many of us have been talking about, and we've just been waiting it out, sometimes in deep frustration, but he provides a lot of good insight on the gold, silver, secular bull market. Here's someone else I wanted to highlight. I've been following him for many years. I started following him on this new Titty Hunter account, but I do have a very long-standing Twitter account going many years back, but I didn't want to use that account for the purposes of this channel because I don't like to mix politics with my portfolio. He follows me back on that channel, not on this one, because he probably has no idea who the heck I am. This guy does a lot of interviews, very thoughtful guy. He's a chemistry professor at Cornell. And one of the things I look forward to every year, at the end of the year, he publishes what he calls the year in review. And it's quite lengthy. It takes a couple of hours to read it, but it is absolutely good, thoughtful information on the economy, on macro trends. He always touches upon gold and silver. I do very highly recommend him. Here's one a lot of folks ask about, and I do have his books that I read a long time ago, and it's Peter Schiff. He provides good information, but as we say in Spanish, el cae algo pesado. And what I mean by that, the guy lacks humility. And I think what's most famous right now, he just had an interaction that with President Trump. President Trump saw that Peter criticized him, and Trump's claiming that he's bringing the prices of things down. I think almost all of you would agree with me that the prices have not been coming down. I don't know where that's coming from. But Peter Schiff essentially lacks humility. There's good content there, but sometimes he's posting a little too much and with a little too much ego. And like I said, it could get a little annoying. I quickly want to touch upon a couple of the fake gurus, and I want to do so because I see them getting quoted a lot recently in Reddit, particularly on Silver Bugs, on Wall Street Silver, on Silver Degen Club. And what I don't like about these guys, yeah, there's some good content, some good things they say, but these are the guys that over the years I've been following for a decade plus. So I've seen this countless times. And these guys do things along the lines of, I have it on good faith that 1 week from now or 1 month from now, one of the major US banks, it's going under. They're making these like egregiously speculative claims, but with very specific dates. I think a lot of us, a lot of the gurus I mentioned earlier, yeah, we say things about where we think things are going, but we don't know exactly when. We can't make that prediction. But these guys like Martin Armstrong, Andrew Maguire, Bill Holter, these are guys that time and time again, they're like, exactly on this day, this is going to happen. And then things don't pan out and they just continue talking as if like nothing ever happened. And I mean, that gets under my skin. I can imagine that getting other people's skin. So I really wanted to highlight those folks because I see them getting quoted in people's alleged due diligence on social media. And I mean, this has been around for a long time. I don't know how many of you have been around in 2008, 2010, even prior to that. In those years, there was in the message board days and Yahoo Finance and some other message boards. Who can remember Winter Benton, and Winter spelled with a Y and not I? And I remember that was one of these fake gurus putting out this like semi good due diligence, but then making claims that we're going to put JP Morgan under. All everybody has to do is buy 1 ounce of silver and we're going to put them under or they're going to go out of business. And then silver started correcting very heavily and then they vanished and you never heard from them again. So stay weary. I call these fake gurus when they make very specific claims, when they say on this month or in this quarter, this is gonna happen. Nobody can make those types of predictions unless you have insider information. So you want to steer clear of these types of fake gurus. And speaking of wanting to predict timing, if you ask me what's going to happen to gold in 2026, if you could analyze an unbiased probability space, if you think on the downside, and I talked about this in an earlier video, we could have folks that have made a lot of good profit in gold and silver and miners in 2025, and they're looking to lock in profits, but they want to wait till 2026 so they could defer the tax burden, the taxes they have to pay on those gains. So we could get some downward pressure in the beginnings of 2026 as we have folks who want to lock in profits, but we don't know how much of an impact that'll have. It's merely speculation. But I think the other thing that's going to happen in 2026 is money managers, they're going to have their clients come to them and say, what have you put my funds into? I'm hearing gold and silver have gone up. Silver has doubled in 2025. Oh, I don't have any silver exposure. Why don't I have any exposure? And that might bring in new money in 2026 into the sector. But one of the things I've seen some people talk about, not many, is the wealth effect. And what I mean by that is people are going to start to take notice and say, hey, there's people right now I'm noticing, my peers or somebody they know, they're making money in gold and silver. And because money is being made, just that human psychology component, that's going to bring more people into the sector who want to buy it. I want to talk now a little about the miners, gold and silver miners, and the royalty companies. My friend Bullion Cat, who I mentioned several times on this channel, he's the one that actually got me into Mexican numismatic coins and into Libertads and other coins and metals from Mexico. And we were just chatting, and he's redistributing some of his retirement funds out of the general market as he believes things are overpriced and overheated, and he's looking to rotate. He's already said he's rotated into some of the metals ETFs in the retirement account, but he wanted to also have exposure to miners and royalty companies. And so he asked me, do you have any in mind? And as I mentioned before, on this channel, I like to share lessons I learned from my bad beats. And couple of my bad beats have been in this sector were I'd read some of the followings from some of the miners that claiming that they have proven improbable reserves of the following, and they're expanding and doing these projects, and they're going to be profitable. And then some of them go under. What I wish I had more exposure into, because they have been the most solid companies throughout the years, are the royalty companies. Royal Gold, ticker RGLD, Franco Nevada, ticker FNV, and then Silver Wheaton, SLW. Those have been really solid ones, but I wanted to give an example of one that I still own, and I've owned it since before it was ticker AG, First Majestic. I owned it when it was on the pink sheets because it's a Canadian company, Canadian miner. But one of the reasons why, and I'm going to show you, people ask me, I always recommend going into one of the miner ETFs because that way you can mitigate any overexposure collapse from a single miner. And one of the things that's been happening from some of the miners, like First Majestic, is that they keep issuing more and more shares. When I got in pre 2010, there was less than 10 million shares outstanding, and now you have over 20 million shares outstanding. Another miner is Core Mining, ticker CDE. And this one is another one. They keep increasing the shares outstanding. They actually just did it recently. I was lucky enough to cash out some call options before they did so. I had $10 and $15 calls, and I got out starting in the upper teens. As you know, this is a very long-term chart, so it shows what it once was. But in more recent times, the stock is at pretty sizable highs. But this is another one guilty of issuing more shares outstanding. And due to that, it's another reason why I do not like to recommend people picking individual miners unless they pick a whole huge pool of individual miners. But if you're going to do that, you might as well make life a little easier and purchase some ETFs. And then just a disclaimer, you should do your own due diligence. You should seek advice and counsel from a financial professional. But just talking about avoiding single name miners in general, due to not only some of the risks I outlined, but then you also have to deal with sovereign risk, where other countries, they could go and just nationalize the miner and basically take over all their assets. And so that's why I think ETFs mitigate all those risks. So I just want to talk about several of them, quickly go through it. I mean, you could freeze these screens and see all the detail. It's worth highlighting right off the bat that all these ETFs are near their 52-week highs. Because why? Because gold and silver have been taking off this year. As I mentioned earlier, I believe this is not the blow off top. I think this is just the beginning of this portion of the secular bull market, because prices have been suppressed for so long. And so here they are, the main core ones: GDX, Ring, and SGDM. And then, GDX, they're the larger established producers, most liquid, and they are held by the big institutions. So think of them like your blue chip gold miners. Ring, same kind of thing, but it's a more diverse exposure geographically than the rest of the world. SGDM, these are more quality ones, more defensive, might not have as much upside, but they're going to gain the upside, assuming a continued secular bull run with silver and gold. This next one, GOAU, this one, as an addition, it has exposure to royalty companies. So you've probably been asking, you've said royalty companies a couple times. What does that mean? That means these companies don't directly operate their own mines. They'll finance somebody's mining operation in exchange for saying, you might give me X% of your revenue, or you might give me X% of your production. They have agreements in place for the mines that they finance. So GOAU does provide exposure to the royalty companies. Next, we have GDXJ, and this one is more risky. Why? Because, okay, on the upside, it really takes off. when gold and silver are moving, this one really begins to take off. But conversely, if you have major corrections in gold and silver, these miners are going to have very, very sizable corrections. And because of that huge volatility, high volatility traditionally for most is associated with the term high risk. And then these last two are focused in on silver. They're predominantly involved in the business of mining silver. They're mining other metals as well, because in the process of mining silver, you end up mining other metals like copper, etc. So then SIL and SILJ. So SIL is similar to GDX, but on the silver side, and SILJ is the riskier one. It's like GDXJ, but on the silver side. So I know I've mentioned this a couple videos, but I really, really think it's worth reiterating again. I talk about these stackers that I see on Silver Bugs, Wall Street Silver, Silver the Gen Club, and I have there on the screen. I'm on Silver the Gen Club, and I'm showing you some of the stuff these people buy that they have this obsession with just pure weight. Doesn't matter, just build weight, keep buying ounces. They buy these sizable generic bars, and some not so generic, but for the most part, and then generic rounds. And I don't think I've shown you, I've highlighted how when some of these people go to sell, they realize, oh my God, they're offering to buy it back sizably below spot. Whereas you're not going to have that experience with the major sovereign coins: American Silver Eagle, the Silver Panda, the Britannia, the Kangaroo, the Libertad, the Maple Leaf. All those coins. Someone's going to Costco right now in this country. They're selling American Silver Eagle tubes. They're not selling generic stuff that no one knows or is familiar with. These are a lot less liquid. And so when they go to sell, they're going to be offered much less below spot. And I think this is really going to be exacerbated in 2026. I don't have the stats on me now, but I saw a chart that showed the number of layoffs in 2025 year to date and compared it to other years for that same time period of the respective years. And 2025, the number of layoffs in 2025 is up there with the great financial crisis and with the tech bubble burst. So I know the media, the financial media is downplaying the layoffs a bit, but they're really getting up there, and I think it's really going to pick up in 2026, especially if they can't let the bubble in the market continue to inflate. They're going to keep laying people off, and naturally you're laying people off. That's going to impact those of us that are trying to protect our wealth via the stacking. And so when they're forced to sell, a lot of these that went after the pure weight and didn't focus on the major sovereign coins that have the most liquidity and maintain their premium, they're going to get a rude awakening. I mean, it's really bad out there. In my days in college, I was in a science undergrad school, and I remember biotech was considered the hardest major. And I mean, you got to take all the sciences. There's barely any room in that major to take any like electives, these nonsense electives like gender studies, this studies, theater appreciation, art history, stuff that really serves no real life purpose, at least in my opinion. That major required just, it was very planned out, hardly any flexibility in electives. It was all science. You were back in when I finished undergrad after the tech bubble burst, and you had a biotech degree, you were getting a job. And right now, I saw on Reddit, in the biotech subreddit, there are students coming out with PhDs in biotech, and they cannot get a job. It's that bad out there. The people with a biotech PhD, they're brilliant individuals, and they cannot even get their foot in the door. That's how bad it is out there. Now let's talk about today's highlighted silver coin, the 2021 silver Libertad. and I think it goes without saying, I don't want to go too deep into it because I've mentioned it in the last couple of videos, with what started as a smaller sample size amount in late 2017 and then ramped up very sizably from 2018 onward, is these post-production companies that take Libertads and they go and they color them, and they make a whole bunch of releases, they charge their markup, and they make money. And since this has been happening, very heavy volume of coins since 2018, of course it continues through 2021, and it's still here with us in 2024. They continue to sell these coins, and it's a whole lot of them. So I didn't illustrate a whole entire slide per se, but I just put the information together on the spreadsheet over here. And 2021, if you go on Banco de Mexico's website on the Mintage CM27 report, it will show that the mintage was 450,000. And like the other years since 2018, where we say at least 50,000 to 100,000 of those pieces minted by Mexico, that's the number that essentially they get colorized and sold by these post-production companies. From what my understanding, one of the big major ones is out of Europe. And so if you eliminate 50,000 to 100,000 from that mintage number, then the true range of surviving collectible numismatic pieces is then 350,000 to 400,000. Before we take a look at the population reports of graded coins at NGC, PCGS, and look at the eBay sold comps for this coin, I wanted to talk about the U.S. Mexican Numismatic Association. I've been writing articles in their quarterly journal for the last couple years, and I'm planning to write one in 2026 pertaining to the 1 ounce silver Libertad, the Mint State series, the 1 ouncers. And aside from the colorized factor, there are other factors that I have identified and quantified that impact the mintages for every other year. Some years more sizably than others, but I'm kind of in a holding period, so it's not going to be in the next issue because there's a lot of conjecture going on, a lot of things happening right now, which I was asked not to talk about. But the main factor that we all know is going on is that the official mintages for 2025 have not been published on Banco de Mexico's website. So it is hard to move forward without them updating that CM27 report and publishing those 2025 mintages. So I think once we're given some type of closure on that, then I'm in a holding state. Once that's provided, I'm going to be moving forward with that article. And then once that's published, I'm eagerly looking to share my findings with everyone. Let's take a look at the graded coin populations at NGC and PCGS. On the NGC side for 2021, we have almost 3,000 coins that have been graded. We're at 2,994 with top pop MS70 of 1,929. On the PCGS side, we have just over 2,500 at 2,533. And again, the top pop MS70 with 1,575. Let's have a look at the latest sold comps for the 2021. Let's have a look at the latest sold comps for the 2021 Silver Libertad, sorted by the most recently ended auctions or buy it nows. So we have from yesterday, December 7th, $65 for a raw, $56 for a raw, $71 for a raw. Day before that on the 6th, $70 for a raw, $68.99 for a raw, $59.95 for a raw, $66.99 for a raw. So that's kind of a pretty tight range of prices. If we want to find a graded one, we have on the December 5th a PCGS MS70 that went for $150. We have another PCGS MS70. This one on the same day went for $189.95. That one has one of the exclusive this exclusive green label from PCGS, and some people appear to pay a premium for that. So that's kind of the insight on why this one in particular on the same exact day went for a little higher than this label. This one is I wouldn't say it's more exclusive, but there seems to be a group of collectors out there that like to piece together sets of Libertads or have as many years as possible in this green label. And because I've been seeing that behavior, naturally you're going to see a premium for that label. And that's not the only label. There are other labels out there I've seen. It's just a label. I mentioned these labels are exclusive to particular dealers. They kind of have to be a dealer and meet certain criteria, and then they get their own exclusive label. So there are people out there that for certain labels, they're able and willing to pay a premium versus some other standard labels. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to click like and subscribe for more gold, silver, and Libertad content.